Hi, I'm Brooke. My sister used to laugh whenever I spoke about love, especially when I said my fiancé was in the special forces. She called it a fantasy, said I was too plain for someone like that. But that night at our engagement dinner, something happened. A guest stood, saluted Talon, and everything stopped. Her smirk vanished. And that's when the world started asking, who was really telling the truth all along? But what they don't know is, this wasn't just about one night or one insult. It was years of being talked over, rearranged, erased. So how do you reclaim a life your own family keeps trying to rewrite? Let me show you. And tell me, if your sister turned your engagement into a stage for humiliation, would you stay silent or would you rebuild your own table? When Vera made that joke about Talon, the room lit up with laughter like someone had just told the best line of the night. Special Forces. Girl, is he real or a Craigslist fantasy? She tossed it out so casually, smirking over her mimosa, eyes flicking from me to the others around the brunch table like she expected applause. And she got it. A round of polite chuckles, a few guffaws, even a snort from Aunt Janice. No one said a word in my defense, not even Mom, who simply stirred her coffee and glanced out the window like this moment was beneath her interest. Not even Dad, who kept tapping the screen of his phone like the silence made him invisible, and definitely not Talon, who sat next to me, chewing his food slowly, sipping his coffee, as if he didn't hear the words at all. I smiled, of course. Because what else do you do when you're the punchline and everyone's enjoying the joke? But something behind my ribs tightened, like a string being wound a little too taut. The rest of the brunch played out like a sitcom rerun I'd seen too many times. Vera hogged the conversation, recounting the story of her latest event launch in Boulder. She mentioned her Instagram followers more than once. She threw a compliment to Mom about how elegant the centerpiece flowers looked, even though we all knew she'd picked them herself. And me, I stayed quiet. I offered smiles. I helped pour juice for the nieces. I stacked plates at the end like I was the hired help. We left right after dessert. Talon didn't say much in the car. The moment we pulled into the driveway of our apartment, I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for hours. I need a minute, I told him. He nodded, kissed my forehead, and went inside. I sat in the car for a while, watching the late afternoon sun throw shadows over the houses across the street. Then I pulled out my phone and opened the group chat, the one labeled Brooke's Big Day. Except it wasn't there. My stomach dropped. I scrolled, checked archives, typed names into search. Gone. I opened my messages and texted my cousin Katie, who'd been helping with the planning. Hey, did we move the wedding chat somewhere else? I can't find it. There was a long pause. Then, oh, shoot, I didn't realize. Vera made a new thread with fewer people to keep things more organized. Hang on, I'll send you something. A screenshot came through. It was the chat. And I wasn't in it. But that wasn't the worst part. In the thread, I saw Vera had sent a meme of a woman in camo gear holding a Nerf gun with the caption, Brooke's fiancé reporting for duty. 12 laughing emojis, a comment from Mom. Maybe just elope and save us all the trouble. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I just sat there, letting it settle like silt in water. I locked my phone, climbed out of the car, and started walking. There's a path by the reservoir near our place, a looping trail that takes maybe 40 minutes if you're not in a hurry. I'd walked it 1,000 times before, but today, every footstep felt heavier. The air was crisp, the geese were loud, and my thoughts wouldn't stop echoing. Craigslist fantasy. Just elope. Not in the chat. I've been the extra all my life, the unplanned baby after a 6-year gap, the one who wore hand-me-downs and got secondhand praise. While Vera went to prom in a custom dress, I hemmed mine myself and hoped nobody noticed. While she brought home debate trophies and perfect AT scores, I was the kid who quietly passed biology and never caused trouble. I wasn't the golden child. I wasn't even the silver one. I was the shadow behind the spotlight. So no, this wasn't new. But this time, it cut deeper. Because it wasn't just about me, it was about Talon, the man who had been nothing but gentle, thoughtful, and real. He wasn't flashy. He didn't show off. He didn't correct people when they got his job wrong. And now I understood why. Because to people like Vera, if something isn't shiny or Instagrammable, it must be fake. That night, I didn't say anything to Talon. I told him I was tired and went to bed early. He kissed my cheek, told me he loved me, and I just nodded. But under the covers, in the dark, I stared at the ceiling and made a promise to myself. I wasn't going to defend my truth anymore. I wasn't going to ask to be heard. I was going to live it, breathe it, stand in it, let them doubt, let them laugh. They'd see. And when they did, they'd wish they hadn't made me the joke. I reached over to the nightstand and picked up my ring. I slid it onto my finger, not for show, not to silence the whispers, but to remind myself, this is real. He is real. We are real. I turned off the lamp. My phone buzzed in the dark. I grabbed it, expecting a message from Talon. But no, it was from Vera. Hey, you'll be okay sitting by the restrooms at the brunch venue, right? LOL. I knew what that text meant. Not just the literal meaning of sitting near the restrooms, though even that would have been insulting enough. But no, what Vera was saying was clear. Stay in the shadows. Stay in your place. Don't expect the spotlight. I didn't reply. Instead, I turned my phone over on the nightstand, lay back on the bed, and stared at the ceiling for a long time. Talon came in after brushing his teeth, glanced at me quietly. You good? Yeah, I lied. Again. The next morning, Fort Collins was bathed in that kind of sunlight that almost tricks you into thinking the world is kind. Birds chirped as if everything was perfect. I stood at the mirror, pinning back a loose strand of hair, steadying my breath. I'd picked a deep green dress, simple, clean lines, nothing flashy. Talon looked crisp in his button-down. When we pulled up to the brunch venue, I could already feel it. The place was immaculate. Every chair had a gold sash. Every glass shimmered. Vera's name was on the welcome sign in looping cursive, hosted by Vera Ellison Events. It was our engagement brunch. Ours. But everything here screamed her. Inside, guests were already mingling. The music was soft jazz, the kind Vera thought made people feel elevated. People smiled at me, but it was the kind of smile you give to a distant cousin, not someone being celebrated. Meanwhile, Vera moved through the room like a socialite in a commercial. Hugs, air kisses, compliments flying. She saw us walk in and waved, but didn't walk over. Talon leaned in. Want a drink before we find our seats? Yeah, I said, but my voice didn't carry. A waiter offered champagne. I took a glass and followed the small white cards lined up on the table near the entrance. My name was there. Brooke Ellison. Table 12. Talon's card was next to mine. Table 12. I glanced at the floor plan map taped to the board. Table 12 was in the back, right near the double doors that led to the hallway for the bathrooms and the service area. I stared at it for a moment, trying to process the insult without letting it pierce me too deeply. Then I turned to Vera, who was mid-conversation with one of her vendor friends. I walked up slowly, waited until she turned toward me. Hey, I said. You put us by the restrooms? She blinked, then gave me that saccharine smile I'd seen her use on Instagram followers. You said you were low maintenance, sis. And just like that, she turned back to her conversation. I stood there for a beat longer, holding my breath like it might anchor me. Then I turned and walked back to Talon. She put us near the bathrooms, I said quietly. He looked at me, expression unreadable. Want to leave? No, I said. Not yet. We walked to table 12. As we passed the other tables, people nodded politely. One guest, an old friend of Vera's from college, actually said, "Isn't this event stunning? Vera really outdid herself." I forced a smile, the kind that didn't reach anywhere near my eyes. When we sat down, the floral centerpiece nearly blocked Talon's face. The air near the service hallway was cooler, like an afterthought draft. I tried to let it go. I told myself this wasn't the hill to die on. But then I picked up the event program. It was printed in gold on thick cardstock, another Vera touch. On the inside page, there was a welcome message. Then a section labeled The Happy Couple. Next to my name, Brooke Ellison, bride-to-be. Next to Talon's name, TBD, job info not provided. My stomach twisted. I glanced around. A woman at the next table had already read it and was whispering to her husband. He looked at Talon. Then they both looked away. TBD, I said under my breath. Like he doesn't exist. Like I made him up. Talon caught the shift in my voice. What is it? I held up the program and pointed. He read it, and for the first time since this whole circus began, his jaw actually clenched. I didn't speak, neither did he. We sat there, trapped in that moment, like two statues in the wrong museum exhibit. Eventually, a waiter brought appetizers. Someone played the piano near the front of the room. Vera laughed, high-pitched and effortless. I looked at her, really looked, and wondered how long she had been waiting to do this, to be the curator of my embarrassment. Even here, in a celebration that was supposed to be mine, I was an asterisk, a note in the margin. Talon reached over and gave my hand a soft squeeze. You okay? I nodded, but we both knew I wasn't. The meal went on, toasts were made, plates cleared. No one came to our table except staff. We were in a ghost corner of the room, surrounded by clinking glasses and secondhand smiles. When dessert arrived, mini lemon tarts with edible flowers, the MC took the mic. Oh, before we close, we'd love to hear from the woman who made all this possible. Let's give it up for Vera. Applause. I knew what was coming. Vera floated to the front, dress gleaming under the soft chandeliers. She took the microphone with practiced grace. Her eyes scanned the room, and then settled on me. I braced myself. When Vera had the mic, someone always got bruised. And this time, it was going to be me. She spoke with poise. Her voice was syrupy and sweet, the kind of tone she used when she was about to bury you under a mountain of compliments laced with insult. To Brooke, Vera began, lifting her glass like she was at the Oscars. My baby sister, who always had the biggest imagination. She used to tell her dolls they were going to the moon. A soft chuckle rippled through the room. And now, she tells us her fiancé is in special forces, she said, pausing just long enough for the punch to land. Always dreaming big. This time, the laugh was louder. Some people even clapped. I didn't smile. I sat perfectly still, holding my fork as if it anchored me to the table. Talon, sitting beside me, didn't flinch. He didn't reach for my hand. He just kept his gaze forward, jaw set. And to Talon, Vera continued, dragging out the name like it was unfamiliar on her tongue. Whoever you are. She smiled brightly. We're all looking forward to getting to know you, if you exist. Another round of laughter. I didn't even feel it this time. I was past the sting, past the heat. I was numb. When she finally stepped away from the mic and sat back down to thunderous applause, I leaned toward Talon and whispered, I'm going to get some air. He nodded. I stepped outside through the side door, into the narrow garden behind the event hall. The air was crisp, the kind that pinched your skin just enough to remind you you're alive. I didn't cry. I wouldn't give her that. Later that evening, after the event had wrapped up, and Talon and I helped collect a few leftover decorations, because of course we did, we drove to my parents' house. Mom had invited us over for a casual unwind, which was her way of saying she didn't want Vera's energy lingering in her home too long. When we arrived, the house was dimly lit, quiet. Talon stayed in the car, scrolling on his phone, giving me space. I walked inside, and as I took off my coat and hung it by the door, my eyes landed on the hallway, the photo wall. It was a timeline of our family, frames of birthdays, graduations, weddings, anniversaries, each one perfectly arranged, centered, leveled. My gaze fell to the biggest frame, Vera's graduation from Northwestern. There she was, center stage, cap and gown, holding her diploma next to my beaming parents. Then, a few inches below, slightly to the side, taped onto the frame of another photo, my high school graduation, not framed, not matted, just taped. It was slanted, the kind of angle that made you tilt your head just to make sense of it. My lips parted slightly. I took a step closer. There I was, in my navy blue gown, standing next to Mom, who wore sunglasses even though it was cloudy that day. Dad wasn't in that photo. He had been out of town for work, I remembered. I stared at it for a long moment. Just slipped in at the bottom, I murmured. I turned to walk toward the kitchen and paused when I heard voices, low and laughing. It was Mom and Vera. I stopped short at the edge of the hallway, just outside the dining room. I told her we're booking the photographer next week, Vera was saying. Mom laughed. She'll say she wanted something simpler anyway. She always pretends not to care. I mean, really, Vera continued, if we left it up to her, she'd probably do her vows in sweatpants and forget the cake. They both laughed again. Then Mom added, just keep things elegant, okay? Brooke tends to overcomplicate everything with all her feelings. She won't push back, Vera replied smoothly. She never does. I didn't move. I didn't announce myself. I just turned back and quietly stepped out the front door. The night had fallen fully now, the stars faint above the soft suburban glow. I walked back to the car, opened the passenger side door, and slid in. Talon glanced at me. You good? He asked. I smiled faintly. Oh, you always ask me that. Because I always mean it. I looked ahead, gripping the edge of my coat. Let's go home. The next morning, the sun was barely up when I drove myself to Vera's office. She ran her event business out of a little commercial space she rented in a strip of shops across town. She wasn't expecting me. Her assistant, Narina, opened the door, startled. Brooke, hey, I didn't know you had an appointment. I don't, I said, brushing past her gently. I won't be long. Vera was at her desk, sipping her matcha from a glass tumbler. She looked up, startled but not surprised. Well, she said. Didn't expect you so early. I sat in the chair across from her. I just came to ask, I said. Are you really planning the entire wedding without me? She blinked, set down her drink. What are you talking about? You met with the planner. You booked a caterer. You even scheduled the venue tour. Her jaw tightened for a split second, then relaxed. We didn't want to overwhelm you, she said casually. You've been so sensitive lately. I figured it'd be easier if I handled the logistics. Without telling me? She shrugged. I was going to loop you in, eventually. I stared at her, feeling that familiar mixture of fury and fatigue rising in my chest. You're hijacking my wedding, Vera. She rolled her eyes. Brooke, let's be real. You don't know the first thing about event planning, and let's be honest, your taste leans rustic. This needs polish, presentation, style. And control, I said. She smirked. If you really wanted control, you'd have taken it already. I stood. This isn't about taste. It's about respect. Oh, please, she scoffed. Don't get dramatic. I leaned over the desk slightly. You don't get to erase me from my own life and then act surprised when I push back. Her smile faltered. I walked out without another word. Back in my car, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I opened the Notes app on my phone. Typed in one sentence. Step 1. Take back the narrative. And I meant every word of it. They'll learn soon. Silence doesn't mean surrender. That thought stayed with me as I walked through the entryway of the engagement party. If I hadn't seen my name printed on the welcome board outside, I wouldn't have believed this event was for me. Everything, every flower arrangement, every piece of signage, every catered canapé, screamed Vera. It was curated to perfection, like one of her brand collaborations come to life. Talon held the door for me, but his hand lingered on my back longer than usual. I knew he felt the tension, too. Inside, the lighting was soft, the air scented faintly of peonies and expensive perfume. The room buzzed with polite conversation, clinking glasses, and soft jazz played by a live band tucked into the corner. I recognized some of the guests, Vera's former clients, influencers she'd tagged in holiday posts, a few relatives who always called me the quiet one. No one approached us right away. People nodded politely. A few smiled like they didn't quite remember who I was. Meanwhile, Vera floated through the room like a seasoned anchor at a news gala, hugging, air-kissing, performing. Are you okay? Talon leaned in. I'm fine, I answered, automatically. We walked further in, and that's when the band started playing. Talon slowed his steps. His shoulders stiffened. It was subtle, but after all this time, I noticed every nuance in his body language. I glanced at the stage. The lead singer was tall, brunette, striking, the kind of woman people remember. She was also Talon's ex. I'd never met her, but I'd seen an old photo once, a glimpse of her tucked into the corner of his dresser drawer before we moved in together. I didn't mention it then. He had looked embarrassed to still have it, and now here she was, in a silk jumpsuit, holding a microphone like she owned the room. Before I could say anything, Vera strutted across the space, mic in hand, her voice amplified with confidence. Everyone, let's welcome a very special surprise. This was Talon's favorite band from back in the day, right? She winked at me. I thought we'd bring a little nostalgia to the party. I didn't react. I didn't move. The singer stepped off stage during the break and walked directly toward us. I guess I missed the wedding invite, she said, laughing lightly. Talon gave a polite nod. Didn't expect to see you here. Same, she replied, locking eyes with me for a beat too long. Well, I hope you two are happy. She walked off before I could decide whether to say anything. Talon glanced at me, his jaw tight. I swear I didn't know. I believe you, I said, because I did, but belief doesn't erase discomfort. We made our way to our table. Again, not centered, not special. The decorations around us were a muted version of the extravagance in the rest of the room. Intentional. Vera smiled at me from across the room, raised her glass as if to say, "You're welcome." That was it. That was my limit. I stood and made my way toward her, weaving through guests, my heels clicking with every step like punctuation marks. Vera was mid-conversation with a local wedding blogger when I tapped her arm. She turned, her face lighting up. "Brooke, darling, loving the vibe, aren't we?" "Did you seriously bring her here?" I asked, not raising my voice. Her smile didn't falter. "It's a public band, sis." "Don't be so touchy." "She was never public to you." Vera leaned in slightly, lowered her voice, and said, "If you're so confident in your man, why does it bother you?" I stared at her. "Because you didn't do this for nostalgia," I said. "You did it to get a reaction. You brought in someone from his past to destabilize his present." She sipped her drink. "Drama isn't attractive, Brooke." "No," I replied calmly. "But manipulation isn't subtle, Vera." She raised an eyebrow. "You going to make a scene? Right here?" I took a step back, tilted my head, and said something I hadn't said to her in years. "You're crossing a line. Don't push me." I didn't wait for her response. I turned and returned to my seat next to Talon. As I sat down, the band started their next set. The song choice stopped me cold. It was a soft, haunting melody, one I'd only heard once, hummed by Talon under his breath while cooking breakfast months ago. He had told me he used to dance to it back when things were simpler. The singer's voice floated over the room like perfume, sweet and deliberate. I looked at Talon. He didn't move, didn't look at me, didn't speak. I didn't cry. I didn't ask questions. I didn't give anyone the satisfaction of seeing me bend. I reached for my glass, took a slow sip, and smiled thinly. Let them think I was unraveling. Let them believe it didn't register. They'd learn. They'd learn soon. Silence doesn't mean surrender. The silence they mistook for weakness. That was me loading the next move. I woke up the next morning with that line still pulsing through my veins. It had followed me into sleep, wrapped around my spine while Talon's arm draped across my waist like armor. I moved carefully not to wake him, slid out of bed, and walked barefoot into the kitchen, where the light was just beginning to shift from gray to soft gold. By the time we arrived at the evening reception, the tension inside me had been coiled tight for hours. My body moved on autopilot, hair curled, dress zipped, lipstick just right. But my mind had already left the ballroom before we even walked through the front doors. This wasn't a party. This was a stage. And Vera? She was holding the spotlight. Talon opened the door for me with a gentle glance. "Whatever happens tonight," he said, "you've already won." I gave him a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Let's go be polite." The venue shimmered. Vera had rented a lakeside estate with floor-to-ceiling windows, glistening silver table settings, and candlelight glowing from glass lanterns arranged just so. I'll give her credit. She knew how to create a scene. It just never occurred to her that some of us preferred reality over performance. Inside, Guests mingled like they were waiting for an award ceremony to start. I recognized many of them. Family friends, former clients of Vera's, people who didn't know me beyond being Vera's little sister. We made our way toward our assigned seats, and I tried to steel myself for whatever game she had planned this time. When the music faded and dessert was being passed around, the MC stepped up with a grin. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's raise our glasses and welcome the woman who brought this entire evening together, Vera Ellison." A round of applause erupted. Vera walked toward the mic like she'd been waiting for this her entire life. Her dress sparkled with just enough dazzle to command attention, but not enough to seem like she was trying too hard. She held a champagne flute in one hand, the mic in the other. She didn't look at the crowd. She looked straight at me. "To my little sister," she began, voice silky smooth, "who's always had a flair for dramatic declarations." A few light laughs. She let it linger. "Special forces, huh?" she continued, swirling her glass. "Maybe next time, go for a magician. They at least pull rabbits out of hats." The laughter was louder this time. The room shifted. Some people looked at me. Most didn't. I turned to look at Mom. She was already sipping from her wine glass, her face blank, her body angled away from me. Talon didn't move, but I could see the sharp set of his jaw. My fingers tightened around the base of my wine glass. I thought I might snap the stem, but I didn't. I stood, calmly, quietly. The MC, caught off guard, paused. Vera smirked. I walked up to the mic. There was a strange hush, like even the chandeliers were holding their breath. I took the mic from Vera gently. Our fingers brushed. She didn't let go immediately. I didn't either. Eventually, I spoke. "Thank you, Vera." I turned toward the room. "She's always had a gift for making my real moments sound like punchlines. I'm glad you're consistent." You could hear the silence land like a coin dropped in a church aisle. I handed the mic back to the MC without waiting for applause and walked back to my seat. Talon didn't say anything, but his eyes said enough. The evening dragged on. Toasts were made by people I barely knew. Someone gave Vera flowers, like she was the bride. And then came the final touch. The gifts, or rather the lack thereof. I opened my small envelope from my mother expecting a card. Nothing. Blank. Just a name written on the front. Meanwhile, Vera stood proudly, clutching a small velvet box from Mom. Inside, a vintage pearl necklace, our grandmother's. I recognized it instantly. I had asked about it once when I was 15, after Grandma passed. Mom said it was being saved for the right moment. Apparently, that moment belonged to Vera. "You'll know how to present this properly," Mom said, clasping it around her neck. I didn't say anything. I didn't flinch. But I felt it. After the reception, the air outside was cooler, almost sharp. Talon and I walked hand in hand toward the parking lot. Neither of us spoke right away. Finally, he said softly, "You okay?" I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled out my phone, opened my notes, and typed out a sentence that had been echoing in my chest all night. "Next time they laugh, I'll be too far ahead for them to see me." I hit save. Because I meant it. She wasn't done yet, but neither was I. That night, after Vera's final toast at the reception and the calculated dig she slipped in like a smirk under a silk glove, I let her pull me aside into the hallway near the coat room. The lights in the corridor buzzed slightly, and the murmur of lingering guests filtered in from the main ballroom. "What game are you playing, Brooke?" she said, arms folded, the pearls around her neck glinting under the sconces. I didn't blink. "It's not a game if you're the only one who doesn't know the rules." Then I turned and walked away, straight out the front door, into the evening chill, where Talon stood waiting with both hands in his pockets and that expression he wore when he was trying not to give something away. He didn't ask what she said. He knew better by now. The following evening was the rehearsal dinner, a small, intimate family affair, according to the email invite Vera had forwarded through Mom. Talon and I arrived 15 minutes late, not on purpose, but not in a rush either. The moment we walked in, I sensed it, the energy shift, the forced cheerfulness, the way people turned their heads too quickly or smiled a beat too long. We found our seats without much fuss, but as I scanned the event program, neatly placed on each plate, printed in that same gold foil script Vera favored, I saw it. No mention of me. I was the bride, and yet the evening's schedule had Vera listed to speak. Our parents were listed. Even Talon's name was there, beneath words from the groom. But me? Nothing. I stared at the paper like it might rearrange itself if I looked hard enough. Talon leaned over. That an oversight? No, I whispered. That's Vera. When it came time for speeches, I stood up instinctively. My cue. But the MC, a friend of Vera's from some networking group, quickly stepped forward and said into the mic, "We're running a little tight on time, folks, so let's move ahead to the cake cutting." I froze mid-step. Vera, seated just across the room, caught my eye and mouthed something. "Not your night." The words landed like a slap I didn't flinch from. I didn't sit back down. I just turned slowly and walked toward the back of the room, found a glass of wine, and posted myself near the bar. I could feel Talon watching me. I could feel the guests watching him. The band took a break. Chatter rose. Cake was being plated, and I was still sipping from the same glass when it happened. A man in a navy suit approached Talon, middle-aged, gray at the temples, the kind of man who looked like he belonged to 3 veterans groups and didn't have a single social media account. They exchanged a few words, quiet, casual, until something changed. The man's face shifted. He squinted, leaned in. "Wait a second. Aren't you Captain Lin? 101st Recon?" Talon didn't say anything at first. Then he gave a slight nod. The man's posture straightened instantly. His voice dropped into something reverent. "You saved us. Syria, 2019. No one knew. We knew." The words cut through the room like a sudden draft. Someone nearby set their fork down too loudly. Conversation stalled. Then the man, this grizzled former combat medic, lifted his hand and saluted, right there, next to the dessert table. Dead silence followed. Vera, who had been walking across the room with a flute of champagne, stopped mid-step. Her heel slipped slightly, and red wine splashed onto her pale dress. No one noticed. They were all watching Talon. The photographer raised his camera instinctively. One click, just one. But that was all it would take. Talon returned the salute. Nothing dramatic, just a clean, respectful gesture. And me. I leaned back in my seat at the bar, took another sip of my wine, and whispered to myself, that's the only speech I needed. No mic, no stage, no clever toast, just the truth, standing tall. The energy shifted from that point on. People started approaching Talon, not me, not Vera, with soft curiosity, with gratitude, with awe. Aunt Caroline asked if she could shake his hand. Uncle Frank, who rarely talked to anyone under 60, gave him a pat on the back and said, "You kept that quiet, son." The rest of the evening blurred after that. I stayed calm, collected, never letting the satisfaction bloom too wide across my face. But Vera, she couldn't recover. She laughed too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. She made comments about how some people like a little mystery in relationships. She tried to pull focus, but the spotlight had moved. After the guests trickled out and we'd said our goodbyes, I walked down the hallway toward the coat check. Vera was there, leaning against the wall like she was waiting for me. "You planned that," she said without preamble. "Planned what?" I asked, letting my voice stay neutral. "Don't play coy. That man, whatever he is, he embarrassed me in my own event." "He didn't say a word," I replied. "He just showed up. Same as I did." Vera's mouth twitched. "You knew what would happen." "No," I said, pulling my coat over my shoulders. "But I hoped the truth might find a way to walk in." She said nothing after that, just stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. And maybe she was. Because the quiet girl she used to mock had just become the center of a story she couldn't rewrite. Vera stormed off after that final exchange, her heels clicking down the hallway like gunshots in a quiet town. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. That night, Talon and I went home in silence. He offered to stay up and watch a movie, but I told him I needed to sleep. The truth was, I wasn't tired. I just needed quiet, the kind that let me breathe again after holding it in all evening. The next morning, I opened my phone to find 3 missed calls from Mom, a string of messages from cousins I hadn't heard from in months, and a link, just a single link, from Katie. No caption, just that. I tapped it. A photo loaded. Talon, saluting the retired medic at the reception. It was a perfect shot. The angle caught both men framed by the soft amber lights of the dinner hall. Talon's posture was precise, respectful. The older man's face looked like reverence carved in stone. Below the photo, real hero, no spotlight needed. It had been shared over 20,000 times already, and the comments, wow, this is what humility looks like. She doesn't need to explain anything. She already won. Her sister clowned her, and life clapped back. By noon, it had hit local news blogs. By 2, people were dissecting clips from the event, zooming in on Talon's expression during Vera's speech, analyzing my reaction, praising my silence. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't gloating, but I wasn't surprised. Around 3 o'clock, I glanced out the window and noticed a dark SUV pulling into the driveway. No one I recognized. A soft knock on the front door followed a few seconds later. Talon opened it. 2 men in plain black suits stepped inside, flashing military identification. "Captain Lin," one of them said. "Your presence is required." Talon didn't blink. He nodded, looked at me, then said, "I won't be long." I just nodded. I understood. They left, the SUV tires crunching quietly against the driveway gravel. And then, I waited. I didn't call Vera. I didn't answer Mom's texts. Instead, I scrolled through comments. I watched it unfold from my couch, wrapped in a soft throw blanket, sipping lukewarm tea I'd forgotten about halfway through. That afternoon, Vera's phone rang non-stop. I knew it because Katie texted again. "She's freaking out. You should probably call her." I didn't. Later that evening, I heard from Katie again. "People are calling her out, hard." Apparently, one of the guests, an influencer herself, had posted a clip from Vera's speech at the dinner, the one where she'd mocked my engagement. It showed her laughing into the mic, saying, "Special forces? Maybe she meant special fantasy." That was the caption. That was the hook. And it spread like a spark in a dry field. By dinner time, the video had more than 500,000 views. People stitched it with footage of Talon's salute. Some called it karma. Others called it poetic, but all of them called Vera out. Comments flooded her profiles. "You embarrassed yourself, not your sister." This woman built her brand on empowering women, and then tore down her own flesh and blood for clout. She thought she was the star. Turns out she was just background noise. By 9, 3 brands had already released statements distancing themselves from Vera's content. One cosmetics line said, "We do not support influencers who shame others for personal gain." Her PR agency dropped her. I didn't laugh. I didn't even smile. But I felt something settle inside me, like the center of a storm, calming just enough for you to stand up again. Around 11, I got a call. I didn't answer. It went to voicemail. Then another. And another. When I checked the inbox of my old email account, the one I used for the wedding planning, I found dozens of unread messages from planners, venues, bloggers, even Vera's assistant, all asking if the wedding was still happening, all tiptoeing around the real question, had I walked away? The truth was, I hadn't, not yet, but I was getting close. At midnight, I sat at the kitchen counter, phone in hand, when Talon returned. He didn't speak, just kissed my forehead, then leaned back against the wall. "How bad is it?" I asked. "Pretty bad," he said. "She wasn't just careless, she was loud about it. And now everyone knows." I looked at him. "Do you regret it? Staying quiet?" He shook his head slowly. "No, some things don't need defending. They reveal themselves eventually." I nodded. The next morning, Vera locked herself in her room. She didn't answer calls. She didn't post. She didn't film any stories. But I know what she did. She watched the video. Over and over. The one of her laughing, the one that made the world realize who she really was. And for the first time in her life, Vera was no longer the main character. And she didn't know who to blame. By the time Vera locked herself in her bedroom and shut the world out, The rest of us had already stepped away from her spotlight. The world wasn't watching her anymore. They were watching the truth unravel and watching what I would do next. I didn't make a grand announcement. I didn't gather my things with drama or tears. That Monday morning, I poured myself a cup of black coffee, sat at the kitchen counter of our apartment, and opened the family group chat for what I knew would be the final time. There was a silence in that thread, the kind that came after an earthquake. No one had said anything since the video of Vera's mockery went viral. I typed slowly. "This is my last message here. No response needed." I paused. My fingers hovered over the screen. Then I added, "I've spent too much time trying to belong to a family that's made me feel like an outsider in my own life. I wish you all well, but I'm done pretending this is love." And then I did it, something I'd rehearsed 100 times but never had the courage to execute. I tapped Leave Group. The phone gave a small buzz in my hand. The thread disappeared. I exhaled. Next, I opened the wedding folder in my Google Drive, the one Vera had insisted we share so she could streamline things. There were spreadsheets, venue estimates, catering menus, floral mock-ups, all the pieces of a day that was never really mine. One by one, I deleted them, not out of anger, out of clarity. The venue reservation Vera had signed under my name? I called and canceled it, told them they were free to rebook the date. No explanation offered. Then I pulled out a thick envelope from the kitchen drawer. Inside was a notarized letter I had asked our family lawyer to prepare the week before, after everything started to slide toward the edge. I'd removed myself from the shared inheritance agreement. The family trust had my name on it by default, but I no longer wanted anything that came with strings attached to that house, or those names. I drove to my parents' home in the early afternoon. They weren't home. The lawn was still neatly trimmed. The ceramic welcome sign Vera had bought them for Christmas was still hanging on the porch. I slipped the envelope through the front door mail slot. Attached to it was a note, handwritten, no pleasantries. "I'm not asking for less. I'm asking for nothing." That night, Vera went on television. A daytime talk show had reached out. They wanted her to reclaim the narrative. She jumped at it. Of course she did. If there was one thing Vera couldn't live without, it was an audience. She wore ivory, a soft blouse, minimal makeup. She opened the segment with a watery smile and a carefully modulated voice. "I never meant to hurt anyone," she said. "Especially not my sister. We just have different ways of showing love." The host listened politely, then cut to the now infamous video. Vera laughing into the mic, rolling her eyes, mimicking me. The audience fell silent. Then, the screen split. On one side, Vera's moment. On the other, a still image of me sitting quietly at the dinner table, sipping my wine while Talon stood tall beside that retired soldier. No mic, no speech, just stillness. The host turned back to Vera. "How do you explain that contrast?" Vera blinked, struggled. "Brooke has always been reserved." "I guess people see that as grace. The internet didn't need her spin. It already had the full picture." That afternoon, 2 hashtags trended nationwide. "Stand with Brooke." "Class is silent." I didn't post, didn't share, didn't like or comment, but I saw it. I saw the tweets, the articles, the think pieces. Strangers writing things like, "She said nothing, and somehow said everything." Every woman with a toxic sibling felt that clip. She didn't just walk away, she walked forward. I closed my phone, tucked it in the drawer, and went to make dinner. It was quiet, just Talon and me. We ate in silence, but not the uncomfortable kind, the peaceful kind, the kind that meant nothing more needed to be said. A few days later, a card arrived in the mail, no return address, just my name, handwritten. Inside, a short note. The handwriting was familiar, tight, precise. My father's. "You were always enough." I'm sorry it took this long to say it. There was no love, Dad, no invitation to talk, just that sentence. I didn't respond. But I kept the card. Some wounds don't get stitched up, they just stop bleeding. That weekend, Talon and I moved into our new place. Small, quiet, far enough from everything that I could finally hear myself think. I stood at the window late one evening, watching the street below. People walked dogs. Kids biked past. The neighborhood felt like a blank page. Talon came up behind me, slipped his arms around my waist, and kissed the top of my shoulder. "You okay?" he whispered. I nodded. "Getting there." He held me a moment longer. Then we both stood there, watching the world move on. And I knew then, I didn't need a stage to end the show. I just needed the courage to leave the theater. The war was over. Not the kind fought with armies, but the kind that wages inside families, inside names, inside the quiet corners of a person's life. Some battles don't end with a single victory. They end with scars that whisper why you fought in the first place. Silence can be louder than any noise, louder even than laughter or cruelty when it takes the place where chaos once lived. That's what Boulder sounded like to me now. It didn't whisper peace. It declared it, confirmed it. And not the fragile kind of peace that comes from being untouched, but the kind that's earned. The kind that arrives after choosing yourself again and again, even when it costs you everything. My new apartment wasn't remarkable by anyone else's measure. 2 bedrooms, an open kitchen that caught sunlight through wide glass doors, a balcony angled perfectly toward the morning, where the first rays of sun came pouring in like an invitation. There were no boxes stacked against the walls anymore, no wedding decorations still in limbo, no reminders of someone else's expectations, just me, just Talon. Just a life I was finally building on purpose, not by accident, not by permission. Every morning I rose before dawn, a ritual that belonged to me alone. I would slip into my robe, pad barefoot onto the balcony, and wrap both hands around a steaming mug of jasmine tea. Coffee had once been my companion because it kept me running, but tea made me pause. Tea asked me to breathe. And so I did. That Tuesday afternoon, after finishing a STEM workshop with a group of 6th grade girls who had endless questions, tangled braids, and an honesty adults often forget, I returned home to find Talon in the kitchen. He was chopping onions, sleeves rolled up, the rhythm of the knife steady and unhurried. He didn't say much. He never did unless it mattered. But his presence was a kind of language all its own. I drifted into the small office, drawn to the drawer I hadn't touched since moving in. Inside was a lockbox I had carried from place to place, apartment to apartment, like a secret heartbeat. Talon had never asked what was inside, and I had never told him. I sat cross-legged on the carpet, set the box in front of me, and clicked it open. On top lay a folded piece of notebook paper, its edges frayed, the ink faded into soft shadows. I knew the handwriting instantly. It was mine. 15-year-old me had written it, back when I still believed in things like yearbooks, promises scribbled in glitter pen, and the idea of high school soulmates. The words weren't dramatic. They were just true. If no one believes in you, be the first to do it anyway. The sentence trembled in my hands. I didn't realize I was crying until a tear slipped down my cheek and dampened the corner of the page. But it wasn't grief. It wasn't rage. It was relief. Relief that I had carried her voice all this way, across so many battles. Relief that I hadn't silenced her completely. Talon appeared in the doorway. He didn't interrupt. He just lowered himself beside me, shoulders brushing, waiting. After a moment, he leaned in, eyes scanning the faded words. His voice was quiet when he finally spoke. "I wish I had known you then," he said. "I would have believed." I smiled, closing the paper gently. I think I needed to believe in me first. The very next day, Vera appeared on my screen. A public apology video. Her face was bare, her tone softened, her words carefully rehearsed. "I made mistakes. I let my ego get in the way. I hurt people I love." But the internet doesn't reward confessions that come after the curtain has already fallen. The comments filled in quickly, a chorus of doubt. "She's just sorry she got caught." "This woman humiliated her own sister on a mic." "You laughed at the wrong sister." I didn't reply. I didn't repost or share or add my voice to the noise. I stayed silent, but I saw it. And that was enough. The fallout came steadily. Local businesses stopped inviting Vera to charity luncheons and ribbon cuttings. Her brand partnerships, once glossy and endless, dried up like spilled wine on hot concrete. A few old friends posted vague notes about accountability and outgrowing certain dynamics. The empire she had built on appearances and borrowed light was crumbling piece by piece. And me? The part of me that once longed for revenge didn't feel triumphant. It felt still. A week later, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address. Just my name, written in a cursive I hadn't seen in years. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a photograph. Me, no older than 9 or 10, sitting on the couch with my mother. We were mid-laugh, the image slightly blurred in that way only real joy ever is. On the back, in handwriting that ached with familiarity, were the words, "You were never invisible. I just didn't know how to see you." No signature. I didn't need one. That night, after Talon fell asleep, I pulled out my journal. The leather cover was worn from years of false starts and unfinished entries, but now, the words flowed easily, as if waiting for this moment. I used to think being heard meant speaking louder. Now I know. It begins with not shrinking, with standing tall, even when no one claps, especially then. The next morning, I filed the paperwork to legally change my name, not to his, though Talon had offered quietly without pressure. I chose something else, something that had always belonged to me, hidden quietly between my first and last name, Brooke Ellison. It wasn't a declaration, it was a return. Weeks passed, then months. The seasons shifted, the foothills of Boulder turning from golden to snow-capped to green again. My life kept unfolding, not loud, not rushed, but steady. I kept teaching, I kept building, and I didn't look back. One Friday afternoon, as the sun dipped low, I stood before another group of girls at the end of a robotics workshop. Their faces were bright, messy, unfiltered, exactly how they should be at that age. One girl, tiny and fierce, raised her hand. She couldn't have been more than 11. Her eyes narrowed in determination as she asked, "Have you ever been laughed at for doing something brave?" I paused, surprised by the question's weight. Then I smiled. "Every brave person has," I said. "That's how you know it's worth doing." Their laughter bubbled up around me, free and unafraid. And as I looked at them, I realized the war really was over. The scars would always remain, yes, but so would the strength they carved into me. I had returned to myself. And for the first time, I wasn't fighting to be seen. I simply was. Sometimes the loudest statement you can make is choosing to walk away without saying a word. This story isn't just about proving someone wrong, it's about reclaiming your voice, even if no one is listening at first. Have you ever had to choose between staying silent or standing up for your truth, especially with your own family? Tell me in the comments. If this family story moved you, hit the like button and subscribe for more real emotional stories like this one. You never know. The next one might sound a lot like yours.